Hello, for the curriculum comparison project, I decided to use this visual that I created for another class during that was in the Montessori program. I just thought that this was a great example to show of actually two different ideas and philosophies of curriculum that are pretty similar, but then also have some differences. And I love both of them, and I feel like I use different ideas from both curriculums. So it's Maria Montessori and then Jerome Bruner. And first, I'll start talking about Montessori, then I'll talk about Jerome Bruner, and then I'll just go through and kind of compare and contrast, and then say how, let you know how you can also implement this into your daily classroom. So, one thing about Maria Montessori is that she was an Italian physician that used observations and the mistreatment of children to create the new form of education, which is the Montessori schools. She was a big advocate for children and wanting them to be very active in their learning and interest based. One thing that really stands out from Montessori classrooms compared to other classrooms is that they're mixed age classrooms. So you have ages 0 to 3, 6 to 9, 9 to 12, 12 to 15, and 15 to 8-year-old classrooms. They're usually divided into increments of 3 like that. One thing that is very important was that play is the work of the child, is a quote from Maria Montessori. And so she really wanted students to just be active in their learning. And the preparation of the environment is crucial. It's important to have an open classroom design, lots of manipulatives, different toys, teaching toys mostly. And then there's programmed instructions. So the students should know their routine and know how to do everything. But they take the big role in their learning. And then the teacher acts as a facilitator and will plan and prep, but they will also watch the child, observe, and see what choices the child makes. And then they will tweak the programming based on the decisions that choices the children make. So one thing about Montessori is very child-led, very interest-based. They have different areas that they focus on in language, sensory, math, cultural, and practical life skills. So when I visited a Montessori classroom about a year ago, I noticed that it reminded me of Centers, but that all the students were actively learning, and there was a lot of language and discussion going on. And the teachers and the staff were very, very quiet, almost like you couldn't even see them moving throughout the room. And it was very purposeful. They really wanted the children to be active in the learning and then them kind of stepping back. And then I noticed there was about 4 adults, and they would all go to the children and ask questions and really get that questioning and answer technique down, and constantly are observing, taking notes. And so a lot of that planned instruction is actually taking place during from their observations, but then they go and make these changes later on. So it's a very prepared environment. So there's also 4 distinct periods or planes. This is the first plane, which is birth to 6, second plane, which is 6 to 12, third plane, which is 12 to 18 years, and then the fourth plane is 18 to 24 years. So that kind of breaks down the different developmental stages, which is a lot different compared to other developmental stages. There's a more chunk of time in that. One thing that Maria Montessori also said is we aren't going to give them the lessons, we're going to give them the tools so that they can learn. So just that idea that children will learn more and discover more when they apply it to themselves or to their own experiences rather than being told the instruction. Jerome Bruner was an American psychologist that made an impact in cognitive learning theory and educational psychology. He actually helped found Head Start, which is a very important early childhood care program that we have to this day. The main point of Bruner is that he believes there are three important steps for children in their different developmental stages. The first is the inactive representation, which this is action based, and this takes place during the birth to 1 years, and this is when you have the memory with motor movement. It's when you're remembering the things that you're doing through the actions and through doing. An example is a baby might remember the shaking of a rattle, or may just remember different actual experiences that happened physically. The next part and the next highest up is the iconic representation, which this is image based. So between 1 to 6 years, that's when info is starting to get stored as sensory images, such as icons, pictures, in the mind, and thinking off of icons. So this is when you start to understand that pictures have meaning, that different things we just start to remember those pictures and visuals, and that's where this also moves on to semi-concrete, where before, during that inactive representation, everything is very concrete, where now we're moving on to visuals. So it's semi-concrete, but we still have that visual representation. And then finally, there's the symbolic representation, which is the highest task in the children's developmental, and it's for 7 years old and older. And this is when the info is started to be stored as a code or symbol, and this corresponds to Piaget's operational stage, where knowledge is stored as words. So the children start to learn that symbols have representation as well, and that different things represent or different content behind the symbols. So we start to read, we start to understand that words, letters, numbers, all of that has meaning, and then we can start to understand that knowledge. So symbols are crucial for cognitive development, and it goes beyond the information. So it's just starting to get that higher order thinking skill, and that is something that is hard for, I know, my students, that abstract and where they don't have that visual representation or hands-on experience. This can be very difficult, and I think that's what Jerome Bruner mostly discovered, and with Montessori, that really the best way to learn new content is to have those hands-on experiences. So that's where we go into how these two are similar. They both were part of the constructivism ideal. They both thought that social development plays a big role in cognitive development. Maria Montessori believed that it was society's responsibility to help our children grow and become independent and responsible adults. That was something Montessori also believes in, is practical skills, not just academics, but also just learning how to be a good person, learning how to socialize and get along with one another. And then same with Bruner. I mean, he helped found Head Start, which we know that we need those early childhood care programs, and we know that we need to help provide those for those families. Another thing that was important is that relationship between the adult and child. There has to be good rapport, and there has to be trust, because that child is taking part in their learning, but that adult is assessing and observing their learning and then making choices based off of that. So even though the child is very participating in the learning process, that adult is as well. So it's a very important bond, and that relationship is huge. Another thing between these two is they focus on the whole child and that discovery of learning. The learners are able at a young age to understand more material and complex content than we believe they are. But that environment needs to be organized and prepared. We need to have those tools. We need to have the instructor. We need to have the lessons and all of that prepared ahead of time. Learning is an active process, and that learning should be guided by the interests of materials. So the children really take part in their learning, and if they are reinforced by it, then they are going to want to participate more, and they're going to want to be a part of it more, and that it's just part of that discovery. And then they also both do scaffolding, where we build upon prior knowledge and we really get at the child's level, but we also want them to reach beyond what they're being told or learning. So one way that you can really incorporate both these ideas into your classrooms is to make some independent work time for the students where they can actually make choices. They can have hands-on learning experiences, and that I think just helps create that independence piece. Um, Another thing you can do is make sure to have lots of manipulatives, lots of hands on things. Sometimes I think we even, middle school students and high school students, we think they're older, so they don't need to have these hands on things and these, I should say, learning tools or toys. But really, at all ages, we still need that. That shows that representation, especially new content, that experience is very important. I think that this project was very important because it really made me look at both of these programs and how they relate and also how I can apply it to my everyday classroom. I also think it was really cool to see all of the different presentations and everybody's thoughts on how they can apply things to their classroom. And I learned a lot through this project. Thank you.